Hi everyone, and welcome again to my audiovisual channel. My name is Gabriela Handal if you're new, and I'm a draftsman and also the host of this show, A Conversation About Art. During each episode, I look for the meaning of art and beauty through conversations with colleagues in different artistic fields. Today I offer you episode 77, and I will talk with artist Gary Godbee. If you'd like to support this podcast, you can do so by liking and sharing this video and also by subscribing to my audiovisual channel. These are all immediate and at no additional cost to you. If you'd like to show your support with money, it's also very welcome and appreciated. You can do so by purchasing my drawings directly from my website, which is gabrielahandal.com, just one word. You can purchase crafts I make from eBay, you can buy prints of my drawings, or you can leave me a tip. The links for all of these will be in the caption. Thank you for your time and attention in watching this episode, and do leave a comment so I know you were here. I hope you enjoy it.
Okay, very good. And I'm glad.
What's that?
I'm okay. I'm loud enough. You can hear me okay?
Yes, you are. Okay. I can hear you and see you perfectly. So Gary Godbee, thank you very much for agreeing to talk to me today. Welcome to A Conversation About Art. You are episode 77. Please tell our listeners and viewers who you are and what you do.
Hi, my name is Gary Godbee. I'm a painter and a draftsman. I also teach painting, and I'm currently in my studio. I've been working this afternoon and ready to talk to Gabriela.
Okay. Why don't you tell me a little bit about this drawing and painting that you do? Why, when did you start, and, when did you transition from like a young person who was just doing it as a hobby kind of to somebody that was comfortable calling themselves an artist?
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, that's a good question. I honestly started drawing when I was a kid, when I was like 5 or 6. There was a there was a show on television when I was growing up called John Nagy Learn to Draw, and he was a guy with a plaid shirt and a goatee, except dark. And he would do a drawing in a half-an-hour TV show, black and white, and he would encourage you to draw along with him. So I ended up starting to draw along with him, and I remember that my parents were quite surprised that it looked a lot like what he was doing as a 6 or 7-year-old, and that encouraged me to think of myself as having a certain amount of drawing ability, and I think that support structure kind of stuck with me, and all through elementary school and middle school, I was the kid that would draw the cartoons for all the other kids. That they would come to me with stuff, and so actually, in a kind of an early age, I thought of myself as an artist. It wasn't something that came to me late in life. It just seemed to be something that I really just kind of associated myself with. And so when I went to university and I got a bachelor's in fine arts degree, that was basically gearing myself towards a specific type of art, and basically took it from that point on.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what was it about when you were a young child and a young individual doing stuff? What do you think or what sorts of things kind of gave you permission, in quotes, to call yourself an artist? And I mean, I don't mean to kind of like insist upon the question, but I guess.
Sure, no, that's fine.
Yeah, I just like I was maybe like 20 something when I was like, all right, I guess I can start calling myself an artist now because I can sort of draw. But I could draw before too, but I don't know, there was like some kind of seriousness or like earnestness or discipline or something that I thought had to be associated with wanting to be an artist.
I guess maybe there was more of a naivete in my thinking. I really didn't take it as like, oh, I have to like have a certain number of criteria that I have to, accomplish in order to consider myself as an artist. However, I wasn't very well versed in art either. I mean, again, it really took me until college and taking art history classes and seeing art, going to the Boston MFA and to the Elizabeth Stewart Gardner Museum and seeing art in person and realizing what it was and realizing where I was in relationship to this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So again, so at that point, it was really being an associate with myself as a student. And so, when you are like talented as a kid and you stand out from the rest of the kids, you kind of associate yourself in terms of what that means. Mm-hmm. It gives you a certain type of social status that's different from the football players or the musicians or whatever. But it is a type of status, I suppose. And I think that, for me, that was really kind of an important, mental association I had that it gave me a kind of identity that I might not have had in another way. So as I developed my abilities after school, and really became a professional artist where I actually did show. I showed and sold work. That became that first stage where you really say, okay, yeah, I can really call myself an artist there. So again, as an adult, the assumption of being an artist is much different than the association you might have as a child.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then would you say that then being what your perception was of being an artist as a child was just basically drawing and being able to draw well versus being, I guess, like a professional artist was showing your work, other people want to buy your work, and you're doing it consistently. Does that sound right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, that's absolutely right. I mean, I drew illustrations for a local company when I was 16 or 17 years old. I got paid for that. So again, I mean, that's not the only criterion to consider yourself an artist. Mm-hmm. I think that in the real world, the idea of considering yourself an artist is that you have to see the world in a certain way, and you have a response to whatever it is, being a musician, a writer, an actor, a painter, a draftsperson. You're basically making connections between all sorts of elements in the world around you, and you're seeing patterns, you're seeing relationships that a lot of other people kind of don't look for or don't understand. So that creates a way of thinking and a way of being, I suppose, that really becomes very crucial in terms of understanding what art is, what your relationship to art is, and whatever your art field is. I think that there's a great overlap between, say, musicians and artists, and the fact that they do perceive structure and patterns and rhythm and tone in similar ways, although they're expressing it in totally different ways. But I think there's that overlap in many artistic fields. And when you start really seeing the world that way, I think it makes a huge difference, and you do see artistically. And I think that's the crucial element.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. When somebody says, like what you were saying just now about how I see things differently, or artists, this expression that artists see things differently. I mean, it doesn't mean, because, okay, so I understand the expression, but I often have the impression that when somebody says it, or sometimes when like a person that isn't an artist says that, they think that what the artist is seeing is actually different from what another person who is not an artist seeing somehow. Like the impressionist, or like Van Gogh, for example. Like Van Gogh actually saw the world in the little speckly painty stuff that he did, for example. And sure. That makes no sense to me, in the sense that it's like because the hardware is the same, right? It's like Van Gogh and me, or you, or like a layperson in quotes, have the same eyeballs, the same nerves, the same brain to which that information goes, and it's processed the same way. But then I think kind of the expression of saying artists see things differently is rather like what you were saying, like the processing of not the processing of the information, but kind of maybe like the interpretation of the information to then kind of like put it onto the paper or the canvas or whatever. And like that's collection of aesthetic decisions, you know, the deliberate conscious decision of Van Gogh to make the speckly bitty paints, the specks of paint that he was putting on the canvas, to, you know, have like this consistent language. Like it doesn't mean that he saw the thing like through a that way, you know, he saw the sky as a regular sky, you know, the black stuff with the little dots and stuff, but then he chose to paint them. I mean, I guess I'm saying that because I get like a smidge miffed when somebody says it, and I feel as though they mean they actually physically see the things in a different way. And it's like, you know, that's just an expression, right? You know, well, yeah. What do you think about that?
Well, okay. There's nothing to say that Van Gogh did not actually see some of those things when he would look at the landscape.
Sure.
I mean, literally, the way you represent things does influence the way you see them. You know, after you've painted a certain number of forms for a long period of time, you start looking for those kind of things that you paint in the landscape. And you might, or in a portraiture or figure work, you do sort of see organization of things differently. I think the best way I can explain this is I was taking a film class in college, and we were looking at Sergei Eisenstein's films and looking at Potemkin, and also Ivan the Terrible Part 1 and Part 2. And this is my first year of college. I was taking that as an extra course. And one of the first things they try to instruct you in terms of realism is to be able to discriminate the way that light describes forms. And the easiest thing is to see the light forms against the shadow forms. And if you start seeing shadows as actual shapes, where they actually are created by the movement of the form, and the light reacts in a very specific way on any kind of form, and it doesn't change. It isn't idiosyncratic. It's predictable. So that when you start following the shadow shapes, you start seeing how you can simplify a form into light and shadow. And then when you start seeing the transition tones, the halftones between those two, you can start modeling something three-dimensionally. So that was one of the things that they were trying to get us to see, to understand. But it takes a while. You know, it takes a few months and to really understand that and to internalize it.
Yeah, to learn how
but I remember seeing this, and again, the cinematographer that Eisenstein was using was shooting in black and white with a lot of high contrast, a lot of strong chiaroscuro, shadow shapes. And watching that, it finally dawned on what my instructors were talking about. And once I saw those shapes in a shadow form, I could never unsee them. But until that point, I was never really aware of them. So in effect, what I'm talking about is the fact that there are ways of seeing forms in space and seeing the world that an artist picks up on, that it comes from that kind of understanding of how the world and how light works in the world. Most people see objects as symbols. They don't see them as specific groups of forms and light and shadow, mass, tone, and colors. They really just they see a chair, they see a chair. So when you have someone who's not an artist draw a chair, they draw out of their memory. They can be looking at a chair, but they will draw the chair that's in their head. They won't draw that chair in front of them. And so that's the idea. The artists do get trained to see the world in a specific way. And that's usually what I mean by that, and certainly what most people mean by that. They have this ability to see things. I've had students say, you know, I've seen your paintings and the skies you've painted. And yesterday I was driving and I saw a sky that reminded me of your painting. I never noticed that kind of sky before. So you get that epiphany that someone has internalized something they've seen as that an artist has presented them, and then realize, oh, that is part of the real world that I never saw before. So, you know, I think that's where that terminology is. It isn't really like, you know, again, there are people who are realists but are not strict realists, or people who are abstract expressionists, and you know, you don't walk around the world seeing splashes of color like, you know, like de Kooning or Jackson Pollock. I mean, otherwise you couldn't exist in this world. You'd fall down manholes, you know, in New York City. So it's like, you know, so but the thing is, you can imagine shapes and forms in a different sort of way that generally someone who hasn't discovered those elements is not going to see.
Yes. Okay. Okay, I like that a lot. And it reminds me of another thing, which I also enjoy. I heard it first in relationship to, I think like some kind of cartoon on a newspaper comparing men's brains to women's brains, like the way that each one thinks.
Okay.
So like, or like stereotypically or whatever, like the average, whatever, is that men are supposed to be more logical and women are supposed to be like, ooh, whatever, you know. So like the drawing, the comic cartoon was the man thing was like squares or something, and like the woman's brain was like a plate of spaghetti. And okay, the reason for which I bring that up is because it makes me think of what you're saying, of like artists being able to find relationships between stuff that seem unrelated. And I think the reason for that is that where we're, artists are typically high in trait openness, which is kind of like that curiosity, willingness to try things, and the curiosity for ideas, the interest in ideas and things. So it's like that's kind of like makes it easier to be able to find relationships between things that are unrelated. And I think now that I'm talking about it, I think that's probably why there are so many systems of like proportions and relationships between in the human figure, because you probably know that Dürer, Albrecht Dürer, had like his own system of proportions, and it was like this crazy thing, just like everything he does, of like squares and diagonals and stuff, because he saw that information in the figure, and so he was able, he decided to kind of draw it out. And Da Vinci had kind of like his own with the circles and the things that he did. So it's like, I just think that's really cool. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that especially when you're doing figure work, portraiture, from everything from that has to do with the human body, from portraiture to full figures to figure studies to large compositions with figures. Getting proportions and getting relationships right is really one of the first primary tasks that you have to do. And so most artists are taught, and for good reason, that there are proportionary rules that you kind of can follow. It's not doesn't fit everybody. It's not one size fits all. Right. But that a head size brought down to the feet, is depending on the size, is somewhere around 6 heads tall. 5.5, 6, 6.5, whichever. There's a rule of thirds we use for portraiture. And those things help to create a little more accuracy in your drawing. But the big problem is that these are just guides, and they are there to help you, I think, check to make sure that your drawings and your paintings work well. I am constantly amazed whenever I give these kind of proportional rules to my students, that they spend an inordinate amount of time setting up all of these little boxes or circles or whatever the heck they're going to use to do this stuff, and they don't draw. They don't see what they're looking at and draw it. And I would say, use this to check your drawing. Don't start off doing this. Otherwise, you're not going to learn how to draw, or not going to learn how to paint the forms. And so it is something that you have to kind of be aware of. It's the same thing with perspective. You have to understand linear perspective and atmospheric perspective if you're doing landscape work, but you don't construct your painting with that. I mean, Thomas Eakins would set up these drawings for, he would have someone in a single skull, and he'd tip it in perspective, and he would have one of those stanchions for those bridges set up, and he would have all the water waves, and he would set up this whole grid, something very Da Vinci-like, and he would plot these things out, because he would measure the length of the boat, and he'd turn it in perspective, and he'd know how many grids it's supposed to be in order to be accurate. Now and he would do that without looking at the boat, because he was just, it was like taking a schematic and creating and putting it in three-dimensional space, much like an architect might do. But I think that's a little more intellectual and less artistic in a certain way. I have had students who are always want to follow rules and have guidelines that will give them perfect results.
Mm-hmm.
And that very rarely works
Mm-hmm.
because art's a little more intuitive than that. There's
Mm-hmm.
something that is more like that plate of spaghetti in your head. I mean, it really is. You have to be in touch with a lot of things in order to make something make sense, and you have to give yourself a little leeway with that. But again, getting back to your original point, it's not unreasonable that artists have created a lot of methods for them to create proportions that will at least keep them on the right track. And most artists are aware of it. Most artists who do realism and who certainly have been trained in it are quite well aware of most of those rules because it does keep you on track.
Yeah. I've definitely been kind of, I mean, speaking of rules, I've never been like, yeah, fuck the rules, haha, like a super rebel and stuff. Not really. But more recently, I've come to appreciate them and kind of respect them a little bit more. The presence of them, and it's really thanks to the same individual who introduced the term trait, psychological, personality trait openness, which is Dr. Jordan Peterson, because he talks about artists and just like personality in general. And he talks about the value and the role of rules. And it's not like he invented it or anything, because the saying is that you have to know the rules first before breaking them.
Yeah, sure.
And there's also a thing called Chesterton's fence, I think, which I think also refers to rules or things that are like establishment, quote unquote, which are there for a reason. And before you go trying to topple them, you have to understand why they were put there to begin with, or to understand the reasoning behind them, before trying to get rid of them, which seems pretty, worth considering for sure. And it also makes me think of a time in art when there were many more rules, like during the French Salon, the English Salon, this type of stuff, where it was very, I perceive it as rigid, like, oh, if you wanted to become a professional artist, you had to go through these specific steps. And there was like a hierarchy of what paintings were considered. There was like a top 5 hierarchy of subject matters that were considered to be the best. And if you wanted to become famous or whatever, you had to go to the salon and this type of stuff. And, I feel like I'm slowly kind of warming up to the idea of that in a way, even though, it's not happening at the time, in our time or anything. But at the same time, it's like, you can't deny the unbelievable stuff that was made during that time. So it's like, obviously those rules, in my opinion, were the conduit to it's like, it is thanks to those rules that those incredible things were made, thanks to those constraints. So it's like, you get to know the rules, and that's your foundation, and then you do whatever you want. But then it's like, if you're starting with nothing, no know-how, no basis, no foundation, no pillars upon which to stand, then it's like you have to find your way, and then you have to trial and error like a million friggin' times, instead of, you see what I'm saying? What do you think about that?
Absolutely. Well, the history of artists, working with guilds, working as apprentices to other artists, and learning the craft, learning how to draw, learning how to see the way that their master would see. Going up through the 19th century, where you have the academic standards of the occult in France and England, where they did teach very strict rules, and in fact, one of the complaints of a lot of artists at the end of the 19th century was the fact that the teaching became really stultified, and just they had a very narrow idea of what they considered art to be, and it had to have a certain amount of taste, and you couldn't have nudes in a certain situation. You didn't want to paint modern life. You didn't want to have anything that would upset the rich patrons. But again, up until the 18th and 19th century, you were working. The only way an artist could make a living was to be a court painter, or again, if you were lucky to live in the Netherlands, you did have a thriving middle class, which actually would buy art, so you could actually sell pieces and not be working for the royalty or whatever. So there were expectations. But once we get to the latter part of the 19th century, where all of a sudden the artists rebelling against that kind of rigid thinking, so you do get the Impressionists and the Fauvist painters and the all the way up to the early 20th century, where you start getting into abstraction. A lot of people forget that all of the great New York school abstract expressionists, all those guys knew how to draw. They all were trained or actually could draw really well. Willem de Kooning is a great example of someone who drew magnificently. His early drawings are very Ang-like, and they're gorgeous. But they blew all that stuff apart because they wanted to try to achieve something different. Mm-hmm. So I am really firmly in agreement with you in the fact that I think that having a solid foundation in how to see, and actually a foundation in realism allows you to go away from it if you want to. But if you start with not having any understanding, then you're basically trying to hope for happy accidents that will happen in your paintings or your drawings that will be effective, but you don't know how to construct it because you don't know what works. You're just basically throwing stuff out and hoping something sticks. And I think that's unfortunate, because it doesn't have to be that way. And some people are lucky. Some people come up with stuff. But then again, there is a kind of fatuousness in a lot of art that attempts to be figurative and attempts to be realist without understanding what that really means. Mm-hmm. And you have people who draw poorly, who don't understand color, who can create these things that maybe there's a lot of fine detail, but the whole thing kind of falls apart. And unfortunately, because art criticism doesn't really exist anymore.
Really.
There's no way to sort of say, oh, that doesn't work. Or you'll probably offend someone if you say that. So
I agree thoroughly about the art criticism not existing. It's like I'm not gonna name names because I don't want to give certain individuals any airtime or anything, but it's about the personality. It's kind of like the faux artists, that it's more about the person being interesting rather than any of the work, rather than anything they make being valuable, Yeah.
Well, I mean, again, we're beset in the modern world of cults of personality more than understanding, worth in another way.
Yes.
There's a difference between attraction and achievement. The hard-won achievement is something that a lot of people just don't even recognize, much less accept. So.
Okay. All right. So, Mr. Godbee, then, what is art in your opinion?
Okay, good question, and a hard question, and not something that's easily. I am a realist artist, and I love drawing, and I think that I agree with Degas and his hero Ang, saying that drawing is the probity of art, and by art he meant realism, because again, drawing and understanding forms in the way that you can use line and rhythm and tone to create something that really has a lot of resonance for the viewer. It is something that can't. I've got my phone as my hotspot, but of course it's ringing, so
no worries.
I'm just. Don't mind, just let it go. It's over there.
Okay.
The idea that art can be a lot of different things has not ever escaped me. I've found myself really enjoying a lot of genres of art. I mentioned a couple abstract expressionist painters whose work I really love. I like all sorts of different styles. I'm not. When I look at art, I'm fascinated by anything that that has been constructed well, that pulls me in, that engages me. And I think art's a communication, like any other sort of thing, like great music, like great writing, great theater. It has an element of communicating with someone who's observing it. It's also a great sense of personal expression. So when you combine an artistic person who has something that they want to give and project and give as a gift to the world, and it's effective, and other people receive that, understand it, and get something from what they've said, then you've created this intense communication. And it's about, I think art really is about that kind of element of this mutual combination of things with working on your own inner impressions, trying to bring them into something unique, and also having someone else see that and maybe be changed or surprised by it. You know, I always kind of wonder about, you know, what is it about art that I find the most engaging? And usually it's something about seeing something where it's something that's made extraordinary in some way, so that it might be something ordinary that I've never seen in the way that this artist presented. So it's that element of surprise. So it's either the surprise of the beauty or the beauty of the surprise. It's both of those kind of things, so that you see something that makes your life more full in a sort of way, because it really is an expansive idea, you know, and it has nothing to do with commerce. It has nothing to do with how well you sell, or, you know, where you are in the echelon of the art world. It has to do really with sincerity, and with your ability to communicate that. And that's where we get back to, you know, talking about the idea that you're trying to communicate something, but if you do it poorly, and it does, and it subvert the communication, that's where it kind of falls apart. So there is an awful lot of stuff that goes into it. It isn't just like, you know, people get the idea, you stand in front of a canvas and you start swinging paint for a couple hours and you're done. That's not the way it works. Maybe for some people, maybe, but certainly not for me. I sweat things and overpaint them and change them again and again until I get it just right. Sometimes it's the right brushstroke. Sometimes it's a subtle change of color. Sometimes it's moving an object from here to here. It can be all these different elements that create something that is not just reproductive of something I'm seeing. It really is about translating something I've seen, filtering it through me, my emotions, and some element of my intellect, I'm sure, as well, and then having that presented to the world at large and having other people respond to it. I know not everyone's going to respond to a particular piece I do, and that's to be expected, but there are people that generally do respond to some of them, and that's what I'm trying to achieve. And I think that's the purpose of art, is to create that kind of that spark of recognition that allows people to really feel like it's touched their lives in a certain way, which in a way that, you know, you can feel reading a great novel or a piece of beautiful music. It should touch your soul.
Okay. Okay. Yes. So I like the relationship between, in your description of art, between it being expression and communication, because so the expression part is like on the artist side, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, you're making a drawing and you're trying to convey some information in the drawing, and then when a viewer is involved, then that is when it becomes communication, because that's when the viewer has to kind of like pick up on the message that you left on the drawing, right?
Sure.
So then I like that, or, you know, painting, whatever. I like that relationship. I mean, does that sound right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. You know,
yeah.
you know, I've heard musicians say that without if they're playing at a venue and nobody shows up, then that doesn't happen. But if you get a crowd of people who all of a sudden relate to it, they're the ones that make their music important. You know, it isn't just the music without an audience. It's like, you know, tree falling in a forest.
I thought of that saying too. Yeah.
So yeah, no, absolutely. And you don't, you don't create art for an audience per se. I think every artist that I've admired creates art for themselves, but it's a generous creation. It isn't like a closed in, well, I've got this, I don't care what anybody else thinks, this is my work. And it's not that kind of thing. It really is this sort of thing. I have something I want to share. I want someone to see what I'm seeing, to see and feel what I'm feeling. This is, it's like I've said this to my students: if you're going to go take your camera or your phone or whatever and take some shots you're going to use as a basis for a painting, don't just go to your backyard and take a couple random shots. Have that camera or that phone with you, and you're driving home or something, and all of a sudden the light hits a bunch of trees or something, or you see a road sign that just is the color juxtaposes against it. And I said, if you get that moment of recognition, like, oh my God, that's really cool, that's what you want to find, because you want to communicate that special epiphany you've had with somebody else, because it doesn't always happen, and you can go out and paint beautiful paintings of things that are just mundane forms, and that's perfectly fine too. And if you paint them in such a way that makes me look at something that's really mundane, but in a special way, then that achieves the same thing. It doesn't have to be like a glorious sunset or anything. It just has to be something you found special enough to represent.
Okay. I guess I should have asked this when we were talking about you and your relationship with art, but I guess because you mentioned it at first when you were talking about what art is, I'd like it if you talk a bit more about drawing, because I'm a draftsman as well, and it's like my main medium. I use that word because I like the word, right? It's not like a gender thing. I like the word, and I like the British spelling, the one that's DRAUGHTS, draftsman. Right, I like that spelling. It's like that's what I think of when I say. Anyway, that's a little tangent. But
isn't that the only way?
No, I think the U.S. Spelling is DRAFTS.
Oh, how horrible! That's terrible.
Yeah, I mean, yes, yeah, we agree. So I don't know, it's nice. I like the British spelling more. But yes, so what role does drawing have in the making of art, in the skill of an artist? And the reason I ask, I guess, is because I like drawing very much, is my main medium, but also because I guess I have heard one or two teachers that I really like say something of the sort, something along the lines of like, yeah, drawing isn't like a finished thing. But at the same time, it's like foundational. It's like necessary. You have to know how to draw before you even try to paint, for example, like this. So like it's important, but not finished work, So what do you think about drawing? It's like, tell me about drawing and art and, the relationship.
Yeah. I agree with the instructor said. Drawing is this really natural way to explore something that you're trying to figure out. It serves a lot of purposes. It can be used as a study or a sketch for compositions, where you're basically just looking at large forms in relationship to a larger rectangle, let's say, if you're trying to create a large figure composition. Or it could be a black and white study to see how the value contrast in the composition works. So compositionally, it can be very important. But more than that, and I use it to help me see clearly what I'm wanting to either paint, sometimes just as a drawing. I love the act of drawing. There's something about taking a piece of charcoal or a pencil or a pastel or something in your hands, making marks on this sheet of two-dimensional surface, and within a short period of time you can make look there's something there that's actually three-dimensional there, that really just all of a sudden moves. And that magic that you create is so simple, and it's and without color, without the pastels or colored pencils, but just for using charcoal or pencil. And I do prefer pencil. Um, uh, it creates this illusion of form and space that everybody can read, and it doesn't have the complication of color issues and the tactile issues that you have with physical paint. So it's a different sort of thing. But it really does, I think, speak to that primal instinct that some of us have to represent or to make notations or to archive something that we felt and seen. I think, when you think about ancient, well, not ancient, but prehistoric man, there's always somebody in a group that would pick up some burnt charcoal after they finished the fire and start going on a cave wall and drawing some gazelles or a buffalo or something they're seeing. And not everybody would be compelled to do that, but there'd be one, maybe two in a tribe that would do that. And I can only imagine that they must have had ascribed to them some sort of magical, almost shamanistic powers, just by the fact that they were doing that, because they would take these things and then the rest of the tribe would go, it's that animal that we're trying to hunt, and it's just that extraordinary ability to represent something and to give it meaning, I think, is that initial basis for why so many of us start drawing in the first place. It certainly is. It has resonance for me specifically. Not that I'm going to draw gazelles that I'm going to later hunt, but rather it has that kind of feel that I want to put something down. I love to draw with graphite. I love to draw with pencil. I love the movement of the pencil to create very, very thin, soft lines to slowly render a form. Very much like Ang would say, so you draw lines, many lines, and you basically are following the form. There's this great pen and ink drawing by Rodin, and it's a bearded man standing. He's got a little bit of movement, and it's a full figure drawing in this pen and ink. And it looks really well rendered when you first see it. But when you look up close, every plane, every small plane has been rendered with directional strokes that go across the muscles and the form, the long forms as well as the short forms. And you could see how he's conceptualizing this in a drawing that he could then sculpt. You can imagine him with this clay on the armature and basically taking his tools and pulling the clay off in very much the way that he's doing the drawing. And so I kind of see it that same sort of way, that when I'm using a pencil, I'm actually exploring the form. When I do portraits, this is what I've been doing a lot lately in terms of drawing. I almost feel like and unfortunately, sometimes I love doing it from life, and that's my preference. But sometimes when you're working from a photograph, you've got this flat image, but if it's good lighting, you can mentally imagine the third dimension. And so when you're trying to create that, I can feel like I'm actually touching the face as I draw, and I can feel the turn of those forms, and I can just subtly move the pencil in a certain way. And it just is, it becomes this, I don't know, this magical experience of doing that, because I become kind of one with the subject as I'm doing it. And if I heighten it with chalk that's on a toned paper, then pulling those highlights slowly on, it feels like I'm pushing clay and just pulling the forms out, making it rounder. And I love the use of line to describe these forms. And getting to that other thing you said, I don't consider it finished the same way that I consider painting, although my drawings are finished when they've said everything I need to say, when I've got the forms working so that you look at it and you understand it. I'm not a big fan of drawings that are rendered to the point where you can see every pore of the skin. I don't find that necessary. Right. I find that being the dynamics of a face or a head or a body or a figure is much more interesting to me than something that looks like you've just blown up a photograph.
Right.
And I love photography. So if you have a good black and white photo that has that amount of detail, hell, frame the damn thing. And,
Yeah.
why bother, spending 12 hours rendering a nose because you want to get every little pimple and pore in there. That's my own personal conviction about that. But drawing, I think, is something I use if I'm struggling with an area of a painting and I don't understand what I'm seeing. I will draw it and I'll spend the time drawing it to figure out, because it is a great tool to simplify and understand these things. Because again, as I've said, all the drawing and all the painting, all the sculpture and so on is not just replicating what you see, it's an interpretation. And you have to find a way that interprets it, that makes you see that and go, wow, that's exactly like that thing that you're doing. For me, realized, I kind of tricked you a little bit, because I put stuff in there that's not there, or I've taken something away that may be there because it makes it more confusing. So it is that kind of that intuitive process where you really are trying to describe things. And just that immediacy with drawing, it's also something I think that everybody can do, because anybody can pick up a pencil and do some drawing. Even if it's a stick figure, which is what a lot of people do. You can be trained to draw a little bit. You may not have the skill of a great draftsman, but most people can be taught to draw. And I think that is something that is a commonality. I think people do respond to it because they can. I think when someone looks at a good drawing, they can almost imagine themselves doing it.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. All right. I like that a lot. Okay, Mr. Godbee, then, now what is beauty in your opinion?
Yeah, beauty. Beauty is one of those words that has, in the art world, has kind of fallen out of favor in the last 50 years.
50?
I remember, what's that?
50, 50 years? 50?
50, yeah, 50. Yeah. No, I mean, I'm remembering that if you weren't doing something that was edgy, kind of making a statement about some element of life or politics or something, and weren't taking it very seriously, then you weren't really being a true artist. If you were painting something that gave someone pleasure, it kind of took away from your art in a certain way. And I'm going back like to the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. That has changed to a degree, but I think that beauty in art is not about the subject matter. Have a beautiful sunset, but a beautiful sunset is that's an easy one, or a beautiful woman. I see so many artists who only draw beautiful women and beautiful men, and I'm sure, and they sell them really well, which is great. But if you can see beauty in something that isn't organically, thought of as beautiful, I think you're creating something much more interesting. But beauty is that, I think, again, as I touched on before, it's the element of surprise, finding something unexpectedly beautiful, or something that's that surprises you in some way by either the way it's been painted or drawn, the handling of it can do it, or just the conception of it, how you've seen these things in relationship to something else. I think that art needs beauty. I think music needs beauty. I think it's an important element, because you need to find a way in, I think. And I think beauty lets you do that. But beauty isn't just a simple, easy thing. I think beauty is hard won. Creating something that we consider beautiful does have that element of surprise. You want someone to look at it and go, oh, that's a surprise. I didn't expect that. And I think if you do that, then you can create something that really will resonate with a lot of people. And it's not one thing or another. It can be it could be presented in so many different ways. But I love the concept of beauty in art. I think that it should feel like I had a gallery owner tell me this. He said he was looking at a painting I was working on. I had this building, and it was one of these buildings in New York Harbor, an old brick building. It was on the way back from taking the Staten Island ferry, and it was a pretty damn ugly building. But it was the central building in the painting. You know, there was a harbor in this building. It took up a lot of space. And he said, Gary, I see where you're going with this, but you have to treat that building as a love object. You have to give it as much beauty and as much love as you possibly can. Once you've done that, then it's going to work. Mm-hmm. And so I continued to work on that building, and I understood what he said. I was working on it. Every little shutter, every little pane of glass with these little tiny brushes became beautiful to me. And it was probably the best building I had done up to that point, because I understood what he was saying, that you have to find it beautiful in order to be able to do it and give it the justice. So finding beauty in the mundane is just as important as finding beauty in something that we can all agree is, quote, beautiful. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Okay. Why, I guess I want you to elaborate more if you can, because I'm curious about what you said about it having to surprise you. And although I also like the part where you kind of insinuated that you kind of have to work for it in a bit, in a way, you know, because for example, you have the building that you were talking about. It's like, you know, I think that if one looks at basically, I don't want to, you know, like almost anything for long enough, one can find something to appreciate in that image. Sure. You know, lots of people purport that, you know, death, for example, it's like, oh, the roadkill, or, you know, even pictures of dead people, you know, they say, oh my God, they look so peaceful, sure, and calm and this stuff. All right, just, I have to turn off my oven. I'm sorry, just a second.
That's okay. Turn it off. Don't burn okay. Down your.
I won't.
All good?
Okay. I'm making joiki.
Ooh, sounds good.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. So I'd like it if you elaborated a little bit more on that, because I guess specifically in the case of the surprise part, because you use the comparison with people who are conventionally, in quotes, attractive, you know, some right, people refer to that as just like somebody that's just pretty versus somebody that's beautiful. And I mean, I understand the difference, because I can see the difference if I'm to look at the individuals, and I can, you know, I understand that, but I mean, I don't know. I don't think that I could go further than that in terms of words or explaining it. So you know, like what do you think about that? Why would you, you know, what do you think about that?
Well, okay. So, I mean, what you were asking was, you know, what do I mean by it? It's hard to come by. I think one of the most difficult things for many people to achieve is the power of close observation, of observation that is not superficial, that goes beyond the first thing you see, but rather explores things in a much more, sometimes methodical, sometimes intellectual, sometimes just emotional, but basically being able to observe clearly and closely elements so that you see what those kind of relationships are in the real world, and what kind of effect they have on your visual perception as well as your emotional perception of something. I have students who are working on landscapes, and you know, they have their photo or their iPad and they're working from something, and I'll come up and I'll say, okay, you've got an area there, and what's going on here? And they have conflated like things that are spatially different into one shape so that it doesn't make any sense. Or they've said, there's this, why is that tree a really bright orange tree? And they go, well, it's just a bright orange tree. And I said, no, actually, that's a car or building or something, because they haven't observed it. They haven't actually looked at it. They've seen it from a distance. Oh yeah, I'm just gonna put a spot of paint there. And the impressionists who would do these spots of paint, they're amazingly closely observed. They're not trying to traditionally describe them the way other 19th century painter might describe it. They're being more specific about the way those spots of color go together to create this illusion of depth and space and have that vibration. But understanding how that observation really impacts you is one of those things that keeps you from painting a sunset with just a sky that you've blurred and then throwing a bright sun in there, kind of making the rays go around. Because you want to see, well, what is it about this is special? What is it about it that maybe says something to my soul? And it isn't just that spot of sun in a field. That's typical. So understanding what you're looking at and trying to work it out in a particular way. So you're looking for, it's one of those really odd things. You're always looking for the general in the specific when you're starting to look at it. You don't want to start with details. But then after you've got that general, you're looking for the specifics to give it a uniqueness. And I think that search for a unique quality in what you're looking at is one of the pathways to creating beauty in art. So it isn't settling for easy effects, whether it be, beautiful brushwork that just that's out there, or a drawing where you just make a hard edge against a contour in order to say, okay, that looks really good because it looks like I really knew what I was doing. You can do that too to give emphasis, but on the other hand, it shouldn't be the be all and end all of your work. And it is work. And I think that there's a misunderstanding somehow that artists are not working hard. They work really hard. It can be exhausting. The hours you put in the studio, the kind of struggles you have to create something that starts to approach what you have in your mind's eye. Yeah. That is a journey worth taking, but it is hard. And so I think that's really kind of what I'm getting at, that beauty is really one of those weird things. It's intrinsic in our needs in this world. We're in search of things that are beautiful. We're in search of things that taste good. We're in search of things that elevate us. But to put your finger on what is this thing that is beautiful? We want to get as an artist. Hopefully, we try to get away from the easy and the thing that everybody can agree on, to show somebody something's beautiful that they may not have expected before.
Okay. Well, that was awesome. I have particularly, I like a lot the idea of kind of, working for it, like you said earlier also about working, putting in the effort to find the beauty in something. And I also like, I feel like it overlaps with something that you said earlier also about learning how to see, learning how to observe.
Yeah.
Because one does have to learn how to observe in order to be able to then convey the information on the painting or on the paper, with the pencil and paper, these tools. And it's a skill that has to be developed. It's like you can't just do that. You have to work for it. Yes. So you have to earn it. So yes. And I mean, that working for that and then being able to kind of tell the viewer, like, look at this thing that I saw, observe my observation, I guess, and you kind of share that with the viewer.
Yeah. And I do want to say, Gabriela, that I don't want to give the impression that this can't be done on your own, that you have to go to school, that you have to go to an atelier, that you have to spend
Sure.
7 or 8 years being taught this. In my own experience, the school I went to was one of the few figurative-based schools in the nation at the time, and it's not even that way anymore. It's changed. So if you go to a university situation, you're probably not going to get any of this stuff that I do or talk about. It's going to be much more conceptual. It's going to be a lot different. But you can get everything that I missed in a lot of these ateliers that have sprung up all over the country, and they're wonderful. So in effect, I never was taught how to finish a painting. I was never had an instructor showed me how to make a brush stroke. They all just said, oh, okay, well, that's coming along. Okay, yeah, just keep doing that. In fact, in some cases, I'm sure that some of the students far surpassed the instructors in their painting ability, so that they didn't really have the chance to really give you much more than just, you know, words of encouragement. So I honestly spent a good 15 years after graduating teaching myself how to be an artist, how to paint, how to draw. Drawing came naturally. I always drew well, and then the drawings I did as an 18 or 19-year-old still hold up for me. I go, wow, I don't believe I did that. But the paintings, different story. They were pretty rough because I really didn't know how to control the things that I was learning. And there were little bits and pieces that worked nicely, but not as a whole. So I ended up looking and stealing bits and pieces from every artist whose work I liked. Say, oh, I like the way he did that, so in my painting, I'm going to put some of that in here. I struggled. I decided to give up realist work for a couple of years, and they never talked about anything in the middle part of the 20th century. They never talked about any of the abstract painting that was going on. So I started doing large abstract paintings for a while, just to get that vocabulary in my hands, so that I wasn't doing just straight realism. I wanted to have everything in there. I saw the relationship of flat shapes to three-dimensional shapes and how they could work together, and how a gesture here can do as much as like, you know, 1,000 strokes to describe something. So I learned a lot by doing that. And so when I came back into realism, I came back fresh. And again, I started from a point that was now informed by a lot more knowledge and exploration, and not constricted by what I was, quote, supposed to do. And then eventually found my way from a kind of composite of abstract and realist forms into straight realism, and started discovering landscape painting, which for me was an astounding development, because I'd never really done it before, but I found that I responded so strongly to it. You know, I don't know how much time we have left, so I don't want to be too verbose, but one of the things that I remember doing in college, which nobody should do anymore, we used to hitchhike all the time. I had a friend, like, you know, 5 hours away in a different school, and we'd hitchhike, you know, and go back and forth. Yeah, no, it was more accepted then, but it was still not a good thing to do. But I remember sometimes I'd be, you know, hitchhiking, and all of a sudden it's getting towards the end of the day, and I might be in somebody's car, and all of a sudden the sun would start to go down. You get that sunset and that dusk, and I would be getting closer to my destination. And there was something about that experience that just gave me this well of emotional motion that I said, I just love the way the light is. I love the landscape at this time of day. I love what I'm seeing. This is extraordinary. And that, I think, became kind of the genesis for my desire to, like, explore landscape in all those atmospheric realms that you see, that you sometimes don't notice because you're busy doing stuff. And so, you know, that idea of learning on your own, take classes when you need them. You know, you find somebody who can help you through rough spots, but you can really teach yourself a lot. Yeah. And there's a lot of information out there. And I want to encourage people to realize that they can do that.
Yes. Well, I think that's a excellent thought on which to end the episode, because we have indeed broken the hour-long mark of the conversation.
Yay!
Yeah. So, all right, Gary, why don't if there's anything you want to add, is there anything you have coming up? Is there a project you're excited about, a show or something?
Sure. Well, I
Where
just
can
I just
people
had
find
a
your
one.
work?
Yeah, I just had a one-person show that closed a few months ago in New Jersey here. And I'm participating in a show in the Sal Magundy Club in
Oh, nice.
September. I hoping I get into a show in Norway for the fall. And had been selected in a number of different competitions recently, which has been great. And I'm really just kind of working in my studio at this point, trying to just kind of fill out new directions, or just finish up stuff. It's one of those things a lot of people can experience, can relate to the experience. When you're teaching, you often do a lot of demonstrations in class, and you don't always finish them. So I've got a bunch of demos sitting in my studio that I say, it was a good start. Let me see if I can finish these damn parts. That's what I'm doing right now.
Okay. All right. Well, that sounds great. So Gary, thank you very much for your time today. Thank you everyone for watching and listening. Again, special thanks to you, Gary, for agreeing to talk to me and for your time.
Gabriela, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Of course. Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for the good talk. If you'd like to support Gary, my podcast, myself, or all three, all corresponding links will be in the caption. Make sure you like this video and leave a comment so we know you were here with us. Also, remember to subscribe to my audiovisual channel, and see you next time. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
All right. Thank you.